Hello, everyone. I am Jess Wilcox, the Director of Exhibitions and Curator here at Socrates Sculpture Park. And I'm really excited to welcome you all here tonight, and thank you for being here, and to introduce this conversation among our artists in the Monuments Now exhibition, which is currently on view through March. And so we have four of our artists here today: Daniel Bejar, Fontaine Capel, Dionisio Cortes Ortega, and Bel Falleiros. But I'd just like to start with an acknowledgement that Socrates Sculpture Park is on the ancestral land of the Canarsie, Lenape, and Matinacock peoples, and that we pay respect to their past, their continuing present, and future as stewards of this land. I will also be introducing our moderator for this evening, who is curatorial assistant Danilo Machado. Danilo is a poet, curator, and public programmer living on occupied land. Interested in language's potential for revealing tenderness, erasure, and relationships to power, Danilo is the curator of the exhibitions Otherwise Obscured, Erasure in Body and Text at Franklin Street Works 2019 to 2020, and Support Structures at the 8th Floor Gallery 2020 through 21. A 2021 Poetry Project Emerge Surface B Fellow and producer of public programs at the Brooklyn Museum. Their writing has been featured in Hyperallergic, Brooklyn Rail, Art Papers, Art Critical, Tayo Literary Magazine, among others. They're working to show up with care for their communities, as this is one example. So now I'm going to pass it over to Danilo and our panelists to begin.
Thanks so much, Jess and Sarah and the rest of the Socrates team, and to the artists for being here. This is our second program in this series with the Emerging Artists Fellows. And the first one was so much fun, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So how we'll proceed tonight will be each of the artists will be presenting on a few slides about their work at Socrates, and then we'll be in conversation with each other and with you all, and take some questions towards the end. So I'll introduce each artist in the order you see here. So first is Daniel Bejar. Daniel Bejar is an interdisciplinary conceptual artist based in Brooklyn, New York, working with site-specific performance, intervention, installation, photography, video, text, sculpture, and web-based media. His work challenges the politics of space and bodies within our physical and digital worlds by inserting his work and himself into the public realm to reveal underlying ideologies and power structures that govern our physical and digital worlds. In 2018, Bejar was commissioned to create a permanent public artwork at a public school in Queens by the NYC Percent for Art program. He has also received many prestigious awards, including the New York Foundation for the Art Fellowship in Interdisciplinary Work, a Franklin Furnace Fund grant, and the Rema Hort Mann Foundation Artist Grant. He has exhibited nationally and internationally at venues including the Drawing Center, Brooklyn Museum, and Museo del Barrio, Site Santa Fe, Art News Projects, and the Bronx Museum. Welcome, Daniel.
Hi everyone. Thank you, Danilo, for that introduction. I'm excited to be in conversation tonight with Bel, Dionisio, and Fontaine. And I guess I want to start by thanking Sarah, Jess, and everyone at Socrates really putting together this tonight and helping to make for a successful exhibition under some really unprecedented conditions. Yeah, so the image on the screen, this is my project at Socrates. It's called Monument for Immigrants in Advance of an ICE Raid. and it's installed near the main entrance of the park. And as Queens is home to over 1 million immigrants, the project celebrates New York City's long history of immigration and migration, but at the same time, it is a response and critique to the illegal surveillance, deception, and detention that ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement officers, use to arrest and remove undocumented New Yorkers, which has included arresting brown and black people at courthouses, which was really only just outlawed this past December, impersonating police officers and creating fake universities to entrap immigrants, just to name a few. The extent of damage this rogue government agency has done to immigrant families and communities may unfortunately never be known. And so installed near the entrance of the park, when you walk in to the right, you'll find a monument that takes the familiar form of a memorial boulder, which are commonly found throughout many of New York City's parks and beyond. You've likely encountered these, large rocks with attached bronze plaques commemorating, various historical events or figures. And while this monument may at first look like a large gray and brown rock with a bronze plaque, both the rock and plaque are in fact fake. This ready-made artificial rock, which is hollow, is made from a trademarked material called real rock, and is typically used in landscape design to disguise eyesores in suburban settings such as wells, utility boxes, and irrigation pipes. And so I designed the inside hollow cavity of this artificial rock to provide a sanctuary space for the bodies of undocumented New Yorkers in the event of an immigration and customs enforcement raid. By cutting a concealed opening into the artificial rock, which is hidden underneath its plaque, a person in need is able to enter the monument, turn to covert shelter. Inside are emergency supplies such as a burner cell phone, water, and legal information on what to do if one was detained in an ICE raid. And while researching for the project, I came across a quote which I really loved by the Austrian novelist Robert Musil, who wrote, "There is nothing in this world as invisible as monuments." And this quote really resonated with me and became one of the driving forces behind my counter monument. With this project, I'm interested in the invisibility of monuments, the invisibility of brown and black bodies, and subverting the obsolete form of the static commemorative monument and repurposing these empty shells for our present time. And so using the appearance of a memorial boulder, this monument for immigrants relies on illusion to provide a real sanctuary for a very real and present danger. Next slide, please. Oh, you're already there, thanks. And so in this image, we have a close-up of the bronze plaque and its poem on the monument. Like the rock, the plaque is also fake, which I created using a cold casting technique, which has real bronze inside of it. And similar to the Statue of Liberty, the monument's plaque features a poem by the poet, artist, and performer Rupi Kaur that really resonated with me and I thought really spoke to the immigrant experience. Kaur's poem, Immigrant, reads, "They have no idea what it's like to lose home at the risk of never finding home again, to have your entire life split between two lands and become the bridge between two countries." Next slide, please. Thank you. And so here on the left side of the screen is an image, just a detail of the interior of the monument and the emergency supplies. And so inside the monument, there's enough space for 2 adults and emergency supplies such as a bottle of water, a cell phone, and a red card from the Immigrant Legal Resource Center. All people in the United States, regardless of immigration status, have certain rights under the US Constitution. And so these red cards help people assert their right and defend themselves in many situations. And typically we see bronze bodies as statues on monuments. or physical bodies outside looking at or ignoring monuments. But this project opens up a space for endangered bodies inside of monuments. And so the intention of the work is for the public to interact and enter the monument. And in this other image on the right, we have one of many examples of the public interacting with the work. And so unlike its memorial boulder counterparts, which are weighed down by their heaviness and commemorative histories, this monument for immigrants is lightweight, mobile, and can be deployed into immigrant communities such as those in Queens. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Daniel. Next, we'll hear from Fontaine Capel. Fontaine Capel uses performance, video, monumental drawing, sculpture, installation, and speculative proposals to consider our present roles and to imagine our possible futures. Capel has performed and exhibited works at the Museum of Contemporary Art Chicago, Tiger Strikes Asteroid, the Jewish Museum, and will be included in the upcoming Museo del Barrio Triennial, and has attended residencies at Residencia Corazon Argentina, Acre, and the Chicago Artists Coalition, and was a Cuba One Foundation Fellow. Capel is a frequent collaborator and has founded and led many several community-centered artist-run projects. Welcome, Fontaine.
Thanks. Thanks everybody for coming through tonight. And thank you to Danilo and all of the organizers. Can y'all hear me all right? Yeah? Cool. To be totally frank, I'm recovering from COVID right now. So I'm a little, I'm a little all over the place. I'm going to read something that I wrote about this piece, and then I'll take you through the slides. A Brooklyn stoop is a slippery space. It is privately owned and publicly used, a threshold and a destination, and a place to observe and to be observed. In gentrifying neighborhoods across New York City, stoops that have long offered space for respite and spontaneous congregation are increasingly defended by gates and 911 calls. So what happens when a stoop breaks from its building, leaves its block, and exists on its own? The liberated stoop, freestanding, belongs to everyone and to no one. I've built, as this year's, one of this year's annual fellows at Socrates, I built 2 semi-permanent public sculptures of freestanding New York City brownstone stoops. They stand in a field facing each other about 6 feet apart at an angle. This sculpture will hold, or does hold, hopefully holds, metaphorical space for a difficult and vital conversation around gentrification and displacement, and also a physical space to safely rest, gather, perform, and exchange. This duo of performative sculptures takes its form from a real-life outer borough stoop. It was the stairway to the Park Slope apartment building that my Cuban migrant family called home for about half a century, and which they were forced to abandon by developers. Now the stoop leads not to my Nana's house, but to newly remodeled luxury units. How many New Yorkers' stories of international migration followed by intracity displacement echo that of my own family's? How many more New Yorkers will? While this project addresses a difficult past and a discouraging present, more and more discouraging it feels like every day with the eviction crisis happening in our fair city. It also looks with hope and humor toward the future. So the forms of these stairs are familiar and also uncanny. They simultaneously recall historical monuments, so obelisks, pyramids, ruins, forums, but also an infinite collection of anti-monumental moments, like tying your shoe or getting home with groceries, a clandestine gulp from a 40, rummaging through a box of used kitchenware, or exchanging neighborhood gossip. The stoops are both like and unlike existing monuments. They're for no one and for everyone. They're for my Nana, and they're for you. Next slide, thank you so much. So when I proposed this project, I was already thinking about the potential for the stoop as a monument, but I was imagining it as this elongated kind of obelisk, as you can see in the proposal picture that I made when I applied to be a Socrates Fellow. And so I actually applied with both ideas, the two stoops facing each other, and I wanted to make real this giant monument stoop. But the more I thought about it, the less it made sense with how the space of Socrates is used by the public, and also how I wanted my work to be interacting with the public, or for the public to have the opportunity to interact with my work. So we made the two stoops facing each other, and visitors have found all sorts of ways to use them. Kids particularly are very creative in how they have found uses for them. So I've been having a really wonderful time because I can't get out there that much. But following on Instagram what visitors are up to. And I've included a couple of snapshots of how folks have been using the sculptures thus far. Next slide, please. So for the future of this project, I'm really interested in creating these out of a more permanent substrate, like a more permanent material. It's like COVID fog. So working with Brownstone restoration folks, creating some of these sculptures that will stand in public spaces for, until they get knocked down. Yeah, thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks so much, Fontaine. Next is Dionisio Cortes Ortega, who's an artist and registered architect in New York and co-founder of Reform Architecture. He was born in Mexico to parents that are also both artists and architects, and they moved to New York when Dionisio was 6 years old to experience the New York art scene of the 90s. He took full advantage of this opportunity, attending both LaGuardia Arts High School and the Cooper Union. Though his primary profession is architecture, Dionisio continues to develop his artistic practice through the creation of large-scale outdoor installations. In 2018, Dionisio was awarded a grant to build a piece titled Sitting Together at Joyce Kilmer Park in the Bronx that critiqued the established proceedings of courtroom cases. That following year, he was invited to the Mueller Gallery at Cadwell University to build Blurred Boundaries, an interactive photography installation that challenges the perceived differences between the United States and Mexico. Please welcome Dionisio.
Great, thank you, Danilo. And thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks the park for organizing the exhibition, and everybody in the staff as well. And of course, everybody who came to support and help me build the piece. So the image you see here, this is the sculpture. The main idea is sort of a threefold. It's a monument to the hidden infrastructure of New York City, primarily the water supply, the water system. The entire system brings in about 1.2 billion gallons of water every day. And then it's also a monument to the people who made it happen, to the engineers, the planners, the construction workers. And lastly, and more importantly, it's a monument to foresight. The idea being that without this vision of this solution, this proposed solution, grand solution to the problem that New York had back in the early 1800s, New York wouldn't be what it is. Next slide, please. So just quickly, the image on the left is the entire New York City water system. The first yellow patch you see on the bottom of the map is the Croton area and the reservoir. And then the two orange and yellow areas that you see on the top, that's the Delaware and the Catskill. They bring about 90%, and the Croton, the new Croton Aqueduct brings in 10. The old Croton Aqueduct is no longer in use, but it's still accessible, and there are tours available. The image on the right is from a book, Waterworks, by the Monticelli Press. If you're really interested in the water system, I highly recommend this book. It has all of the history of the system. And this image in particular, this drawing, was one of the earlier ones, and it was the main inspiration for my project. So I'll tell a little bit about the history of the aqueduct, because it has to do a lot with ideas and the actual arc. So from the early 1600s to 1800s, New York was experiencing a lot of difficulties with getting fresh water. When New York was sort of concentrated downtown, around the area of downtown Manhattan, it was very quickly growing, and the few sources of water that were there were the river, which became polluted instantly, and also a couple of water wells, which also were contaminated after a while. So apart from that, there were also a lot of fires that began consuming the city. So this issue, this problem, was affecting everybody. It was affecting the poor, the rich, the government, and everybody needed to come together to form a solution, to create a solution. So from 1833 to 1842, they planned, designed, and built the Croton system, which is the old Croton Aqueduct, which is about 41 miles, and managed to bring in, I think, around 200 million gallons of water back in 1842. Next slide, please. Very quickly, the image on the left is part of the Croton Aqueduct. You can take a tour in Ossining. I highly recommend it. Friends of the old Croton Aqueduct are the ones who organize it. They're a great organization that preserve the existing trail and tour. So if you're interested, get in touch with them. And the image on the right is just from a few days ago from all the snow. So to wrap this, to tie this into the main idea of today, and what really struck me about the story of the old Croton Aqueduct is that it sounds a little all too familiar. Today we're experiencing sort of similar social, health, economic, and environmental crises. And we're living in a global pandemic, a racial reckoning demanding the evaluation of the myriad ways that racism is embedded into our institutions. Economic inequality is at an all-time high, and climate change is an undeniable reality with a disproportionate impact on the most vulnerable. And so I really can't think of a human quality that is more needed today than foresight. So we need to, our communities, governments, private organizations, and companies need to come together and plan for the future. And we have been making some small progress. We all wear masks. We listen to and elevate underrepresented voices, and we have electrical cars and solar panels. But perhaps we're not thinking big enough. And I end my short presentation with a question that I think about, and what seemingly impossibly large project or task do we need to envision now so that we can protect our future? Thanks.
Great. Thanks so much. And last, we'll have Bel Falleiros, who is a Brazilian artist focusing on land identity. Starting with her hometown of Sao Paulo, she's worked to understand how contemporary landscapes and their monuments misrepresent the diverse layers of presence that constitute a place. Walking is core to her practice, and to her first solo show at CAIXA Cultural Sao Paulo as well as her residency at the Sacatar Institute in Bahia, Brazil in 2014. Since arriving in the US, she has worked to create spaces for grounding and connecting people, including a site-specific installation at Pecos National Park, New Mexico, 2016, and earthwork at Burnside Farm, Detroit, and functional sculptures for Community Garden in collaboration with Tewa Women United during the Santa Fe Art Institute's Equal Justice Residency in 2018. She's currently part of Monuments Now at Socrates Sculpture Park and of the More Art Engaging Artist Fellowship, also in New York. Beyond her studio practice, Bel participates in collaborative projects across the Americas, connecting art, education, and autonomous thinking. Bel is a teaching artist at Escuelita en Casa, Gardner Arts Center, and Casa Contemporánea and Dia Beacon. Welcome, Bel.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Danilo. And Fontaine, I hope you recover soon. First, well, hi, everyone. Hola a todos. Thank you for making space to be together today here. To everybody at Socrates and also to everyone who made time to be with us today and who is watching it, the recorded version of this too. Well, I hope this conversation can provide everyone some nurturing ideas while we all navigate this pandemic, sending a lot of love and protection to everyone. So this first image, just a description, it's a drone shot of the piece. And you can see it, how the bricks are arranged around this like hollow part. So there is a hole in the center and you can see the bricks engraved with words that were sent to me and I engraved in this clay bricks that I made from scratch. So to start, this work, it was like the first spark for this project came from a place of rage. It's been a while that I research about monuments and how like it disturbs me to see most of the monuments across the globe are usually completely disconnected from like the stories and the landscape of the places they are installed at. And more than just disconnected, they are like imposed on that soil and the people that inhabit it. So, and on top of that, I think what this work reacts more, it's also how the monuments are usually like vertical sculptures that creates like separation and hierarchical relationship of the people that are relating to this sculpture and the landscape. So the idea was from the beginning to make something that turned that idea over. So it was to make something horizontal, something touching the ground, something that was in the human body scale. And this work actually reacts to a specific monument, which is like the oldest monument honoring Columbus in the Americas. It's a white obelisk that is still standing today in Baltimore and is made out of bricks. So my idea was to turn it inside out and upward down, transforming that first rage I had in me in care and making each one of those bricks with my hands. If you could go to the next slide. So yeah, and thinking about the conversation today, it remembered me when I was recording the audio guide for the piece, and a question that I had with me, and that I'm still sitting with it. Like after a year like 2020, what is still left standing? What needs to be nurtured, filled with joy and care? what is rubble that doesn't serve us anymore? So I really wanted to think like each brick as something each one of us can bring and build together as a construction of what we want for now on. So the image, I forgot to describe, you can see here like park visitors and also people that collaborated to the project with their words. So you can see here Terence McCutcheon, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, who works at the park. And Maria Jose is on the right, on the bottom. She's at Escuelita en Casa, and the kids participated. So this is a very amazing project run in Queens. And Nicelli, Portugal, made those postcards for the kids so they could see their phrases and the monument they help created. Because like this project was supposed to have a more like collaborative in-person part, but we end up doing it all online, this part. But I just wanted to share, like, I asked everyone, the prompt for people sending me the phrases was like, what is the brick, like the foundational brick, the words that are foundational to you that you would like to contribute to this like rebuild of America, since it's reacting to the Columbus monument. And you can go to the last image. Thank you. Yeah, so and here in the last image, you can see like an overview of the piece from a distance, so you can understand the scale and how it relates to this small knoll, that like a mini mountain that is at the park that is facing the river. And also I really wanted to show like one of the favorite bricks that every time I would go there and talk to people is this brick, every being is a library. And I think it's a good way to end up this brick presentation. Thank you, everyone.
Great. Thank you all so much for sharing your work with us. And I'm excited to be in conversation now with one another and with our viewers. First thing I wanted to ask about is materials. I think each of you very intentionally selected the materials for your monuments, and they're so poignant. Daniel, thinking about your real rock, which, you know, named with no sense of irony whatsoever. And even their slogan you mentioned in some of the writing about the piece, the company asked, do you have something to hide? You know, obviously referencing some of the other uses for the material as hiding electrical cables or you know, things in suburbs really that need to be unseen. And then, you know, obviously the bricks in your pieces, I know, so and Bel, and then Fontaine, thinking about your soups as being both wood and sort of restored brownstone material, and also thinking about, you know, you were talking about the future of the project and how sort of the material of the soups is something you'd like to explore, and maybe something more with more permanence. So yeah, I'm curious about, you know, your process and thinking about materials and any sort of reflections, especially, you know, it's been months since it's been installed and even longer since it's been proposed, how you see the materials now and maybe going forward too.
I guess I can start since the material part was like a big chunk of my experience. I've been like, clay's been a company during the quarantine, like the endless quarantine, and a healing partner in this journey. And before all started, I was already like experimenting with clay and trying to honor this like super ancestral material. And for me, what is curious, like the original monument that it refers to, you can't see the bricks, so you can't see the terracotta color. And it was good to see Fontaine's application image, because I also kind of changed my plan, and I was supposed to open the show with the obelisk, and I would open it up during the process of the show, and I couldn't, and I just felt it had to start with the words and with the terracotta color, and yeah, and yeah, I guess that's enough for now. But I'm happy to, like, I'm going to do the Instagram takeover of Socrates, where I'm going on it starting on Friday. So I'm going to share images of the process, and it was very messy, and I kind of took over a lot of space. So I started early, so I didn't take too much space from everyone else.
I'll follow up from that. So for the art, what was interesting is, I think in reality, the actual aqueduct is not as clean and precise and nice as it is in the park. You know, if you remember the image from the tunnel, you know, the brick itself is, I think that is maybe the closest representation of the actual aqueduct. But because it was built on site, a lot of the stone that was used, apart from being local, it was really just to kind of hold things on. So it didn't have to be pretty. It was most of it is underground. There are some instances where it does have to cross over with a bridge. I think there's one connection that goes into Manhattan, and then another in Ossining, which is actually really beautiful. You guys should check it out. It's by the Ossining, I think it's called just a double bridge, where there's a couple bridges that interact. So in a sense, the recreation that is in the park now of the aqueduct is in a way unrealistic. The scale is real, but I don't think it would ever look that beautiful. So I think in terms of materiality, it's all the actual materials. I use the brick and the stone sourced locally, but I had to, in a way, part of what I put into the project was to just make it more like the actual drawing rather than the actual monument. Rather than the actual aqueduct.
I mean, I guess talk about my materials, which are, yeah, it's key to the piece. I mean, you know, when I designed, you know, the concept for the project, you know, from the start, I knew it was going to be a fake rock and a fake plaque. And, you know, immediately I was aware, I don't know if everybody is, but of fake rocks. You know, you could hide a key in some. You know, they're made out of fiberglass. And so, you know, I knew they existed, but the trick was finding one that would, you know, be able to conceal, you know, two adults, say. And that could survive in a public park for 6-7 months through, you know, all sorts of weather conditions. And so I went deep down the fake artificial rock hole, and it's deep. It's, I mean, you know, you can go, I ended up in, you know, companies that make rock or fake rocks for, you know, rock climbing, store displays, and these things are going into like $10,000, $20,000. And like, there was no way I could do that. there was one company that did have a rock that would fit 2 adult humans. But the trick, with that was, it's also, with COVID, something like that, ideally you would go see this thing to see if I could work with it and if it would fit the project. But, so I had to order this thing online and have it shipped to the park and pray that it, was how it looked online. And yeah, it worked out well. And, creating the plaque was another process of, I could have had it made, but by casting it myself, I was able to control, how it was attached to the actual rock itself. There's a hinge mechanism that allows the door to open and close. I mean, it's fixed right now at the park, but technically it can't open and close. And so, creating this faux bronze surface to kind of complete the illusion was key to the project.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about my relationship with materiality in this piece. So my piece is called Proposal for a Monument, and I think about it a lot like that, not as a monument itself, but a kind of gesture toward an idea of what this monument could be. So it is made out of wood and treated with some of the same materials that brownstone restoration folks use, because in the, can you guys hear me again? I'm sorry, I can't talk louder, unfortunately. In the researching for this piece, I reached out to a bunch of different brownstone restoration companies. And unfortunately, their budgets for building an actual one of these stoops is like 5 times the budget that we had. And it would then be a piece of masonry in Socrates that would need to be dealt with. So yeah, we used wood for this. And I actually, when I think about monuments, there's this kind of implied permanence to them. Monuments aren't generally built to be destroyed or forgotten or fall apart. But my monuments are kind of falling apart. And I think that that's really potent, actually. And kind of an unintentional and really interesting to me mirror of their original source material, which is this one stoop on 8th Street between 8th and the Park in Park Slope. That is very dear to me, and a kind of like mythical object in my own mythos. But when I went there to observe it, to take measurements, to prepare to build these replicas, I looked at, so it's part of a row of stoops down the street of identical stoops, and it's the last one that hasn't been fully like gut redone. So it itself is cracked in all of the same places where like my version is starting to show the stressors. There's patches, it's falling apart, it was painted, the paint came off. It's like really a Frankenstein of a situation. And all of the newer ones in the buildings that had been renovated and maybe bought by other developers earlier, there are these really platonic versions of this, like what the stoop should be. And then there's the one that I modeled mine after, which is what actually is, and like has been, and kind of shows the wear of the years. So that was an unintentional, but really, I think, potent use of a material. Or yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And
just to add to that, Fontaine, because I've done a couple of, or I'm actually working on a restoration of a brownstone facade downtown. Brownstone was used a lot as a kind of intermediary material that was not as fancy as marble, but much better than brick. And so it was used heavily during the mid-century, the mid-19th century, and now there's no more. So kind of to your point of like, okay, you know, I want to build a brownstone stoop. You can't, because there's no more brownstone. Any
Yeah.
repairs or any reconstruction of those architectural details has to be made through compounds and mixes and things like that. So,
that's so fascinating that you're working on a, yeah, that's very, very cool. That's also, yeah, that's something that I've been thinking about a lot. Like those slabs of brownstone just they can't be quarried anymore. Yeah, and how a lot of, there's a brownstone mix. I mean, I did a lot of research about this, but there's like a, you know, there's crushed brownstone that's kind of like the exoskeletons of all of these other buildings that's been repurposed and mixed back together and like used for the kind of stucco. Yeah, I'm really, really interested in this material. It's very cool that you're using it. We should talk.
Yeah, definitely. And also reminds me of the sort of approximation that Daniel's material is doing. And also in terms of Bel's piece, I went a few weeks ago, and the sort of crumbling brick on the bottom is so poignant because it shows the wear, and it shows how people are using it, and it shows the weather, and it also like plays with the legibility of those bricks. Like some of them are harder to read now, or like illegible now, and like so many of the other works in the show, like really questioning like the permanence of a monument. Obviously both literally in the installation being impermanent, but also conceptually in terms of all of these ideas around power also having their end, or imagining them having an end.
Can I add something to that?
Definitely.
It's interesting. Like I also got very into bricks because I'm currently living a little north of the city, where in a very small town that used to be the brick capital of the world. And talking with John, he was telling me, who is the director of the park, he was telling me that Socrates was a dock that used to take like things coming from upstate, so stones and bricks, and that's why like Noguchi was there. And what is interesting, like half of the city collapsed because of so much extraction of clay to build New York. So this and now if I walk now in the like Hudson shore, you can see a lot of like washed out like brick pieces. Oh, wow. So there is this like continuously, yeah, it's like what you were saying about crumbling and rebuilding, and it made me think of this story.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I love a show and tell. And sort of, yeah, speaking of sort of the idea of permanence and the future, of monuments, not just of yours, but of monuments in general. I'm curious about any reflections you have about, I think somebody in the chat asked sort of what's next for your monument, but you can also take that as what's next for monuments more generally.
So I'll start with a with a text that I found from an archaeologist, Mary C. Steiner from the University of Arizona. She wrote a paper about sort of how humans, how very early ancient humans dealt with death and how they dealt with sort of memorializing death. So she writes, arguably there are two paths to immortality. One is through the genes we pass on to our descendants. The second path is persistence in the memory of the living. So this sort of second path of persistence in the memories of the living was kind of what I thought was interesting in thinking about how, if we look back at the very first, when people began to settle and become farmers and start as groups creating memories, and as groups losing people and having the need to create something that is sort of has this permanence that allows people to pass on experiences and stories and memories, is interesting, because if we leave it to memory, we're going to forget. Like, that's unlike genes. Our memories will die out. So monuments are, in a sense, you could say a gravestone is, in a sense, is a kind of a monument to a person. Is one of the ways that we've designed to continue a story, to continue a memory, for however permanent the material is, I guess. But I guess now that we've gone through from 50 to 100 group civilization communities to New York, to cities of millions, it's kind of hard to think of, okay, who decides what monuments get built, and or like who decides who we collectively remember, is kind of like one of the questions that I ask, and it's like, I don't know. It's kind of a hard thing to think about in terms of what monuments in the future should be. So yeah, I just wanted to share that thought.
It made me think about a scholar. She's also an architect. I also did architecture school, so we have that nerdy connection. Her name is Rena Swenso. She was she's like was indigenous later in New Mexico, and she talks about the one of her texts is like an understate sacredness. So she talks about how the most important like monument of her pueblo, of her village, is understated thing. Like, it's a small thing, which is the most sacred thing on the earth for their cosmo like vision. And I feel like if we can honor like the smallness of ourselves, and like and I just feel like, yeah, and the humbleness of looking at nature and recognizing our size, and so, like, think about balance, which is something she talks a lot too. How to create a more balanced existence. I think would be very important for us to keep existing in this planet.
Yeah, that was a good passage, Dionisio. It also made me think of, in thinking about monuments and who makes monuments and who has a say, it made me think about, just as an example, just, I don't know if anybody's familiar with like the United Daughters of the Confederacy, which was an organization of women that organized to memorialize Civil War soldiers. And so here you have a group that pool of money and resources and to create these monuments that, passed on a history of the South won and white supremacy. And I mean, I think at the end of the day, like we're still, dealing with today, it comes down to resources and, money and power and who has these things and who has a voice. And so, yeah, I'm not sure what the answer is, but I mean, I think, a halfway situation, is just organizations like Socrates that, provided space and place for an exhibition like this, that, our monuments aren't permanent, but, just bringing that conversation to the forefront. But yeah, if there's more organizations that did, or have space for monuments, holler.
So we should leave it to the artist to decide which monument they build.
Or the people. I mean, if you think about it, it's like, a people's monument, rather than monuments that memorialize, people in power, kind of flip the script. And yeah.
Yeah, what all of you have said, I agree with. And it's all various points of what I've been thinking about. I mean, I feel like we've all been having really similar thoughts percolating around this exhibition and around monuments in general right now. For me, the thinking about monument versus memorial seems really really important right now. And really, I feel like there's a lot there, like memorializing and there's a kind of like forward looking and a back looking to each of these. And I don't know, I'm sorry, my thoughts are a little jumbled right now, but thinking about the works in our exhibition, which ones kind of point toward a future, like have both directionality in what they're engaging with, I think that that's a really, rather than these, monuments that are the monuments to white supremacy, which are also like, hoping toward a future by like kind of recreating or highlighting particular parts of the past. There's real power in that double directionality. And I think playing with that is something that monuments and memorials have a really, more than other artworks that are not permanent, that don't have this kind of the weight of this tradition behind them. Yeah, there's like a potency there. And yeah, the like top down versus bottom up, who gets to choose what is made permanent or what resources are thrown toward. I think a lot about I don't know if you guys are familiar with that book, Emergent Strategy. I think it's Adrienne Maree Brown, that like the concept of emergence, like emergent movement. I think that the example that's given usually is to illustrate this concept is birds or any kind of flock animal that seems to move with one mind. There's no clear leader. I think that is what is the type of thought and motion and organization that's necessary in all spaces right now, not just monuments, but yeah. Oh.
Yeah, and I love how sort of each of you have the sort of talk with this like past and forward looking, and sort of Daniel sort of in advance of an ice raid, and Fontaine thinking about, what does it mean to memorialize a proposal that is like inherently thinking about something past itself, and even and Bel thinking about the, you taking contributions from community members to dictate what is written on the bricks and sort of having it be sort of an ongoing process of making the monument. And even Dionisio, like thinking about like conjuring that past to sort of assert a need for foresight. And yeah, I love how you sort of put it as a monument to that, in this sort of parallel moment that you see us in right now. So a question from Jess is, these monuments were temporary. If you were to remake them again, would you prefer them to be permanent, or do you find their temporary natural nature to be useful to current dialogues we've been having about monuments? And I feel like we've touched upon it, but curious about your thoughts.
I'll go quickly. I think mine, just by nature, the idea is for it to be a mobile and transient type monument. So, I mean, it could exist at, say, like a Socrates permanently, but the idea behind it was this monument that could be moved around where it is needed most, and multiplied. Yeah.
I guess I'll go next. I would imagine that the arch is the construction of the arch now is is a reflection of the past. But I would like it if maybe in the next 100 years there is other monument that is built to foresight of something that we've created today. So in a sense, I don't envision this arch to be completely permanent, because I'd hope that it would get rebuilt as something completely different. I don't know in 100 years what cool infrastructure or what major project's going to be built, but I would hope that there is an evolution of monuments, even though maybe the concept is the same, or the idea that gets passed on is the same.
Yeah, I can go next. Also, Rena Swintel, she also talks about a story that she asked her grandmother. There was a house kind of crumbling in their village, and she asked, like, "Grandma, nobody's gonna do anything." And the grandmother was saying, like, the house has a good life, and it's time to go back to the earth. So I think there is a beauty on like thinking about the more imposing monuments. They are all made of like super strong materials, and I think this idea of continuous transformation, I think it's a more generous maybe approach to monuments. But at the same time, like making all those bricks and engraving all the words, I really felt compelled to keep them. I really think about making them again, and they somehow tap into this idea of a clay library, which is like the oldest like library in the world, was made out of clay and clay tablets. So there is something interesting in the permanency too, if we are honoring a more broad group of people.
Yeah, and that notion of the library, also in that the brick that everybody is a library, nice parallel there.
Yeah. One part of the thing that I think I'm most attached to about my project is its utility, which it seems like is a funny thing to think about, because one doesn't really think about stoops that lead to nowhere as really useful objects, but their utility as a resting space is actually really important to my how I've been thinking about it. I'm someone who has a not very evident physical ailment that makes it hard to walk sometimes for long stretches. I need to stop. I have a spine thing. And having a place where you can rest your body in public, especially in New York City, where everything is increasingly privatized, and defensive architecture, which is actually just aggressive anti-homelessness, but also anti just like human architecture is really increasingly pervasive or disappearing. They're taking the benches out of some subway stations so people can't sleep on them because it wasn't bad enough to have them be like anti-sleeping benches to begin with. Yeah, I think at this moment in this city with this project, I would be interested in a more permanent material and various spaces around the city. But also like nothing's permanent, especially not New York. So.
Yeah, definitely. And just to close this out, I'm curious about what y'all are up to now or in the near future, and if you have anything to plug or to have folks check out that you're excited about in your practices. Yeah, what are your futures? the best we can nowadays.
I can start. I'm opening a show with 3 other artists at the Clemente building in March 4th. It's curated by Elisa Gutierrez, and the artists are Christine Howard Sandoval, Karen Miranda Rivadeneira, and Tatiana Rocha. It's called Subversive Kin. I'm really excited with this show. We're also doing a publication, and I'm on this fellowship called More Art that is related to public art and engaging art with a project that is actually the continuation of this monument project. So the clay library idea, how to expand that. And it's called Every Being is a Library, the project.
Exciting, congratulations.
Congrats.
I'll go, I guess, quickly. I've been in conversation with Friends of the Old Croton Aqueduct organization, and there might be a possibility to recreate the arch in one of their properties. So that's very exciting news. So I'll keep you guys posted on that. But definitely check out the Friends of the Old Croton Aqueduct. The parks are amazing. The tours are great. The people are great. So help us support this old Croton system.
Cool. I'll go next. So I'm currently working on my first book for a project. It's called Dear Aisha Volume 1. I'll be printed by Ligature Press and will be coming out hopefully sometime this spring. And it comes from a completely different project called Operation Guest, which deals with performance. And the book is essentially the text of a email performance where I was in conversation with an email scammer for 3 months, and our conversation is mentioned in the book. So I'm excited for that. I'm
working on a couple of things. I actually am revisiting the stoop, this particular form of the stoop for the Museo del Barrio has a triennial that's opening next month. And I've been thinking a lot about, it's kind of monument related, but the impulse toward preservation and protection. And so I am working with a customs plastic furniture coverer. And we're making a custom sofa cover, but for the stoop. So that's gonna be in the museo. I was gonna do it myself, but then I got COVID and I'm quarantining. So I'm working with a fabricator whose father's been doing this, covering of the sofas for a generation, and then he took it over. So I'm really excited about that project. And also I kind of unceremoniously graduated from my MFA last year, and our thesis got postponed for an entire year. So in April, the Columbia MFA thesis show is going up, and I'll have work in that from a totally different body of work. So yeah.
Wow, all really exciting. And thank you all so much for this really rich conversation. And thank you all for coming. I'll turn it over to Jess to close us out to talk about some of the upcoming projects at Socrates, which we're also really excited about. Let me share my screen again. Oh, I can't share my screen.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Danilo, so much for moderating this conversation. Thank you to Bel, Daniel, Fontaine, and Dionisio for all of your wonderful projects. And it's such a wonderful way to end, thinking about the future in relationship to monuments. As you were saying, this sort of double directionality, Fontaine also looking towards the future. As the show is wrapping up. So, since we're on the future, I guess I'll just sort of pitch our upcoming conversations and programs related to the exhibition, because it's an ongoing dialogue. We haven't solved monuments yet, but the most upcoming is we have an Instagram takeover Bel will be doing on Friday, February the 12th. So please tune in to our Instagram at Socrates Park. And then next week, I think it is next week, Wednesday, February 17th, we will have a video premiere of Emily Johnson's performance on our YouTube channel. That was part of the part 1 of the Monuments Now exhibition. And then just thinking a little further in the future, part of this series, the In Conversation series, the final 3 artists from part 2, call and response of the exhibition, will be in conversation on March 11th. Same place, same time, 6 to 7. And that's Andrea Solstad, Keon Williams, and Sandy Williams, the 4th. So yeah, we're really excited about this conversation continuing in different forms. Hope you'll join us for some of the future programs. And thank you so much for giving us your time.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Gracias.
You get well, Fontaine.
Thank you.
Yeah, get well.
Cuídense. Ciao.
Gracias.